Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. My name is Councillor David Connor, and I'm Chairman of the Planning Committee here at Fenland. Welcome to all those members of the press and the public who are joining us via the live stream. Before we begin, please may I take this opportunity to remind everyone to turn their mobiles and computers to silent and ensure that when using the microphones, the red light is on and turned off when you've finished speaking. Also joining us today are Shane Luck from Cambridgeshire County Council Highways team and Stuart Blake from Norfolk County Council Highways team, who will be joining us virtually, so welcome. We now go to agenda item number 1, and I'd like to ask member services if we have any apologies for absence, and it's Joe today. Over to you, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies received from Councillors Gershner and Councillor Meekins. Councillor Murphy is substituting today for Councillor Meekins. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we go to agenda item number 2, which is urgent items. There are none. 3 is declarations of interest. Member services will now go to each councillor in turn, and can you please state if you have anything to declare in relation to any agenda item? Thank you.
Councillor Benny.
Thank you, Joe. Nothing to declare this afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Connor.
Nothing to declare, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs French.
Nothing.
Councillor Marks.
Nothing to declare.
Councillor Senate Clough.
Nothing to declare.
Councillor Murphy.
Nothing to declare.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. We now go to the main part of the meeting. Members should only make a proposal on the planning application when invited to do so. However, I will be initially asking if anyone is going to propose the officer's recommendation. Clearly, if no such proposal is forthcoming, or if that proposal fails, I'll be then looking for an alternative proposal. Members are reminded that any such proposal should be accompanied by policy planning reasons for going against officer's recommendation. So now, without further ado, I'll hand over to Gavin Taylor. He's the Senior Development Officer here at Fenland to present application F/YR22/1256F, agenda item number 4. So over to you, Gavin, when you're ready. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So agenda item 4 is a hybrid planning application. The full element commits 294 dwellings with associated infrastructure, and there's an outline element to this hybrid application which commits only access and has matters reserved in respect of a community hub or a local centre comprising convenience store and other services, as well as a 60-bedroom care home and some further residential development up to about 14 units. I'll just bring members' attention to the update report circulated yesterday in relation to a correction to the report and further comments received from our Fire and Rescue Service and the Cambridgeshire County Council Archaeology team. So just quick look at the location plan. Site lies at the eastern edge of Wisbeach in the Woolsoken area, comprises approximately 19.3 hectares of fairly sort of flat, low-lying land, comprising sort of scrubland, agricultural land, former tree plantation, and it's essentially divided into sort of three sections crossed through with public rights of way. So you can see from the aerial plan there's sort of agricultural nature of it. And also you can see from the plan to the left, you've got some rights of way that run about a third of the way down from the north of the site and then a third of the way up from the south and southern edge of the site. And as you can see there, a number of TPO trees across various elements of the site, including an area of woodland along that southern boundary there. Meadowgate Academy, as you can probably just make out, sits at the bottom south east of the application site, but outside of the site, and you can see the main housing there over to the western edge, more denser sort of populated area of Wisbeach, and there's also housing that extends north eastwards along sort of Boroughgate Road, etc., but obviously less dense, as you can see there from the plans. So the site forms part of a wider strategic allocation under policy LP8 of the Fenland local plan and policy F3.1 of the Kings Lynn West Norfolk Borough Council local plan. It's a cross-boundary application, therefore. The site's been allocated jointly by both authorities, The allocation identifies the land primarily for housing with sort of supporting infrastructure. The allocation in its entirety, as shown there, is about 72 hectares, with about 48 hectares sat within the Fenland area, wherein about 900 homes are envisaged, with a further 550 to come forward in the Kings Lynn, West Norfolk area there. And you can just see the sort of extent of Kings Lynn, West Norfolk Borough Council in relation to the allocation in that bottom far right inset plan there, sort of edged sort of magenta colour, versus the black hatched area, which is the Fenland area. So as you can see, the site itself is identified in the yellow area there, as you can see. The application site, and as you can see, it crosses both boundaries into both Kings Lynn, West Norfolk, and obviously Fenland, with the bulk in the Fenland area. About 20% sits in the Kings Lynn, West Norfolk area. Kings Lynn, West Norfolk Borough Council devolved powers to Fenland District Council to determine this application. Nonetheless, the local plan policies of Kings Lynn, West Norfolk do form our development plan for consideration with this application, alongside obviously the Fenland local plan and the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Minerals and Waste local plan. So a broad concept plan for this area was approved by this council in 2018. The Fenland local plan policy, LP7, sets out that the broad concept plan for allocations must be agreed and for future proposals to conform to that BCP. As I say, the BCP was jointly produced in conjunction with Cambridgeshire County Council and Kings Lynn, West Norfolk, and identifies housing across the allocation supported by key infrastructure such as a community hub comprising a primary school, local centre, parkland, sports provision, mainly located around the centre, as you can see shown in those rings around the centre core of that allocated area there. In addition to that, the belt of existing woodland at the far south is proposed to be retained, with existing rights of way to be enhanced, with a number of access points along its perimeter to provide sort of adequate links to the wider areas. The BCP also envisages a loop road system with the closure of Sandy Lane. That's dealt with a bit further on in the report, with the idea that the loop road system would sort of prevent rat running through the site. So I'll come back to that later. The BCP also envisages a large area of water attenuation features that would be necessary in order to accommodate the growth. So the application is supported by a sort of general master plan, which sets out obviously the land uses across the site. It's considered alongside the submitted Seagate Homes scheme, which you can just see there faintly to the sort of the western side and northwestern side of the application site. Members may recall considering that in May's planning committee, where it's resolved to be approved subject to sort of completion of the 106. And you can see there is an area of land sort of reserved for a primary school as part of that Seagate scheme at that northern edge of the site there. In respect to this application, it's considered that the proposal broadly accords with the BCP vision, having regard to the infrastructure it proposes to deliver alongside that Seagate scheme and how it also connects across the various parcels. It does recognise some conflicts, as I mentioned a short while ago, with the BCP in respect of stopping up of Sandy Lane. That's set out in 10.9 to 10.11 of the report that members have, just to explain the rationale there. So just looking at the layout, so the plan here, you can probably just make out you've got an area of orange. That's the outline element of this application site. There's the Seagate scheme, sort of a very pale green on that plan, not come through very clearly. And the remainder is a fully committed scheme. And you can just make out that purple line, which is, again, the boundary between Fenland District Council and Kings Lynn, West Norfolk. So the layout proposes a sort of a main spine road running through the site, 6 metre wide, supported by footway and cycleway infrastructure. It leads to various sort of housing points where it narrows down into sort of secondary streets. And then and the small pockets of homes sort of served by narrower private drives in some places, but most served by the adoptable standard streets with footways obviously providing connectivity. It provides for pedestrian and cycle access both into the Seagate development and wider area. Public rights of way are also proposed to be protected, enhanced and sort of connected into the site with areas of open space along the southern right of way. So it's considered in general that the connectivity of the site with the adjacent Seagate scheme in the wider area appropriate for this type of development. In respect to housing, in terms of detailed design of that housing, it's considered that there's appropriate on-site parking, manoeuvrability, refuse collection considered to accord with recap guidance, subject to securing final details of refuse collection strategy. It's considered in general that there are not anticipated to be any adverse amenity impacts for future occupiers or existing occupiers through this layout. Bearing in mind there needs to be a further noise impact assessment from an existing small business on the south east edge of the site there, which currently runs a fencing business. And that's really just to understand whether any mitigation on any individual properties would be required. So the outline element, again, just proposes that local centre with a convenience store and other services, the care home and a further sort of 14 dwellings. It's considered they're appropriately located, sort of follow that broad concept plan vision and would be well connected to the wider allocation. So the application site at the north is connected to Sandy Lane. That's been considered by the Transport and Highways team, considered to be safe and suitable to provide access to that wider allocation. And there's also a framework travel plan which supports the application and through conditions and potentially 106, a full travel plan can be secured to encourage sort of non-car motor travel. The Sandy Lane also has been sort of modelled with a potential future access point to the north should it be required, albeit that's not committed at this stage. But nonetheless, it's been considered that safe and suitable access into the northern pathway can be secured if it's required. In addition to that, through sort of discussion also with Norfolk County Council Highway Authority, significant and considered to be necessary upgrades to the Broadend Road have been identified. Broadend Road itself doesn't benefit from any footways or lighting at this time, and yet would probably serve quite a significant number of units through this development, the Seagate development and the wider allocation. So it's deemed necessary to upgrade in order to support that growth. So the upgrades themselves would see a widening of Broadend Road, footways and streamline the works will necessitate the partial relocation and realignment and culverting of an existing watercourse. You can probably just make out the easement area in orange there. However, the applicant has undertaken detailed discussion with both the LFA and the local IDB, who have all concluded that it's acceptable in principle, subject to sort of gaining necessary consents. So as I mentioned, the rights of way are proposed to be protected here. There's opportunity to upgrade them also, and through discussion with the highway team, there's a requirement also to connect into the right of way where it meets out at Meadowgate Lane, which you can just see in the bottom left picture there. That's byway number 15, which basically runs across the southern extent of the site, Lincoln Green Lane up to Meadowgate Lane. There's also footpath number 4, which primarily sits within that Seagate area. You can see sort of about the sort of top third of the site there, but that also connects up to Green Lane, up where it sort of meets Broadend Road. The proposal there is obviously to sort of protect that area as well, including the TPO trees that exist along there. So there are also some other off-site highway improvements that have been identified through the transport assessment process of this application, which includes sort of introducing pedestrian crossing points and footpaths, both at sort of the junctions of Moneybank, Ramneth Road and at Quaker Lane as well, which you can see there, which will obviously improve pedestrian cycle access to the wider area of Wisbech for future occupiers, which again is sort of in an attempt to sort of try and reduce the reliance on private motor car to access even the most basic of services. In addition to that, the applicant has agreed to the provision of bus stops within the site. And as you may recall from the Seagate scheme, there is a proposal to secure financial contributions for an on-demand bus service. And through that layout, it's deemed appropriate in that it will secure a sort of a looped access arrangement for buses to be able to access from Sandy Lane and exit onto Sandy Lane through both the Seagate scheme and this latest application. So in terms of design, the actual scheme incorporates a mix of housing, which broadly accords with our sort of latest housing assessments, with a mix of 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom properties, both single storey 2-storey and sort of 2.5/3 stories you can see there. That will add interest in terms of sort of roofscapes and scales. It's considered to appropriately and positively respond to the wider character of Wisbech there. You can probably just make out from the bottom plans of this some CGI images of how it may look. The bottom left photograph is that sort of main spine road we talked about with the footpath and the cycleway and footpath either side, so a much wider road, whereas there's a sort of secondary street on that bottom right photograph, which is less formal, but nonetheless provides sort of access for all throughout there. In terms of drainage, there's a lot of drains that run throughout the site. As I say, the applicant's undertaken quite significant discussion with the Water Management Alliance, the IDB, that covers that area. And obviously, the surface water drainage is proposed to be dealt with through a series of swales and suds features, attenuation drainage. Details of its long-term management and sort of securing that final detail is proposed via condition, and foul sewage is proposed to be pumped through into the main network through the site. Obviously, in terms of that outline element, there will need to be some details provided as to how that will be managed, but there seems to be solutions available for the applicant and opportunities or options for them. And there are no objections either from the Local Flood Authority, the IDB, or Anglian Water in respect of drainage proposals. In terms of our arboricultural impacts, obviously there are a couple of TPO trees that are proposed to be removed because of their decline. A couple of ash trees are set out in the report. However, that's pretty limited. In addition to that, essentially a number of all the trees across the allocation have been TPO'd so that we could manage that process through submission applications. So in this regard, you've got an area of woodland to the south of the site which is proposed to be maintained and protected, and there's a woodland management plan actually that will afford it opportunities to be enhanced. There is an area of protected trees at the southeast corner of the site which is proposed to be sort of redeveloped to allow for a suds feature. However, as set out in the report, these area of trees are not considered to have a high amenity value in comparison to the sort of plantation of poplar trees. You can probably just make out in that photograph at the bottom right there, the differences in sort of density of trees. So that bottom far right edge is where the suds feature is proposed to go. You can see it's more sort of scrubland. So it's considered that the additional native tree and hedge planting and the woodland management plan is appropriate in this instance, and will sort of add interest to the area from a sort of a landscape point of view, but also obviously provides biodiversity opportunities as well. So there's quite substantial ecology reports that have been submitted with this report, as you can imagine. This is just some excerpts of what we've got. So the plan to the left sort of shows the various land uses and land types that you've got, and the various habitat features. Semi-improved grasslands, obviously those trees that we mentioned, obviously quite significant belts of hedgerow, particularly along those rights of way that are proposed to be protected. And obviously from that there's been opportunities identified as to both how things are protected and can be enhanced. And there's also some bat surveys that have been done that sort of show the commuting runs of bats, which is that plan to the right there. So just to give an idea of sort of some of the details we've had, but nonetheless, our ecologists, through their assessment of the scheme, has identified that biodiversity net gain is achievable through this scheme, subject to obviously securing sort of further details which are set out in the conditions. And this whole area is proposed to be sort of master planned out from a landscape point of view, basically taking opportunities from existing landscape features and enhancing them. Obviously, as I said before, in terms of landscape impacts, there will be unavoidable landscape impacts, but certainly some of them can be partially mitigated through further additional planting, which by virtue of which will increase biodiversity and ecology habitats. So just looking quickly at some photos just to wrap up. Top left photograph there sort of shows the access from Boroughgate Lane and Broadend Road into Sandy Lane. So looking westwards essentially, so over to the left will be where the access goes from that site there. Top right photograph views north along Boroughgate Lane. Bottom left is the initial field, so the site where your care home, convenience store is going to go. The site access will run down to lead towards the housing area there. The bottom right photo is Sandy Lane, but taken right at the far end on the western end there. So you can see how at the moment it doesn't benefit from any footway networks, and obviously through both the Seagate scheme and this scheme, there's proposed to be a continuous footpath running the length of Sandy Lane there, and then leading right round onto Broad End Road. So this is basically Broad End Road. The top left photo is the point of access from Broad End Road into the site on that bend area there. And you can just sort of start to see Green Lane, both in the top photographs, which sort of spurs off of Broad End Road. That brings you down to the first right of way, known as Walsocombe Walk, which you can see just in the bottom left photo. So that right of way takes you all the way from Green Lane right through to Orchard Drive, through a sort of quite a green, wooded, almost an archway of trees and hedgerow, quite a pleasant walk through. So that's proposed to be sort of retained, and obviously there's opportunity to enhance. The bottom right photograph is further down Green Lane, just as you get to that public byway number 15. That house there is, as I mentioned earlier, there's a requirement to do a noise assessment to understand what the impacts from the business as a yard at the back of that house, just to understand what the impacts may be on the properties that are proposed, to see whether any mitigation is necessary. And that mitigation could be in the way of enhanced glazing or maybe ventilation, should it be necessary. And this is that byway, the access from Green Lane, top left photo, which will take you all the way through to Meadowgate Lane. Again, a nice pleasant walk through, opportunities to enhance, and the right photographs are where that right of way exits onto Meadowgate Lane there. As you can see, there's opportunities there to sort of enhance that, but also whilst retaining its sort of natural aesthetic. And these are sort of views from that byway, views north at the top photograph, so you can just see pretty much agricultural land. That belt of trees you can probably see right in the far distance, the higher ones, that's actually north of Sandy Lane, and you can probably just make out quite a bit of dense hedgerow sort of along in front of that, and that's the Walsocombe Walk that I mentioned a short while ago. The bottom photographs there are that woodland area that I was talking about. So you've got quite high poplar trees that have been planted, and they extend the sort of the width of it apart from, as I mentioned, an area of scrubland and lower trees to that bottom left photo where the suds are supposed to go. And you can probably just make out on the bottom right photograph, in the far distance is Meadowgate Academy, which obviously sits outside the site quite a distance away. So just in summary then, obviously the site comprises an area allocated through the local plan. It's cross-boundary application, proposed in total to achieve 1,450 homes roughly, with supporting infrastructure. It follows a broad concept plan, and it's considered this application broadly accords with that concept plan in terms of how it secures a mixture of uses and houses across the site. Package of mitigation has been agreed by the applicant through discussions with highways in the main, but notwithstanding that, obviously the other matters such as drainage and ecology, etc., have also been considered. But nonetheless, the focus on this has been to mitigate its transport impacts. It's recognised that obviously the site will result in some avoidable landscape impacts, but these are considered to be localised and inevitable given its allocation. In addition to that, due to known viability constraints from the district, the viability appraisal supporting the scheme demonstrate that neither social infrastructure contributions or affordable housing are achievable at this time, albeit a review mechanism is recommended to be secured to monitor and recoup any overage that might arise. However, it has to be concluded that at this time the lack of infrastructure contributions and affordable housing does weigh negatively against this scheme. It's important to apply the planning balance in any consideration of an application, particularly where there are sort of conflicts or disbenefits of the scheme. There are known viability constraints through delivering initial phases of this strategic allocation, and that's set out in the broad concept plan itself. So to a degree, viability issues have always been anticipated. Despite its inability to meet sort of social infrastructure and affordable housing contributions, the development would secure significant housing, including housing which would specifically address needs of older people. In addition, the highway infrastructure will also aid in unlocking that wider allocation and supporting that wider allocation to enable further housing delivery and sort of meeting that vision both of Fenland and Kingsley and West Norfolk. Furthermore, those highway improvements and works to Sandy Lane, Broad End Road specifically, whilst necessary here for this particular development, would also benefit the wider community. As you can see from some of those photographs, the roads, Sandy Lane, Broad End Road, don't currently benefit from footways. So it would improve connectivity, particularly to an employment site to the east, but also sort of enabling more sustainable modes of travel for all, both accessing Wisbech area as well as the wider area. So it's considered on balance in this instance that the benefits of the proposal would outweigh the disbenefits. It's considered on balance it would amount to sustainable development, generally complying with the development plan when taken as a whole. So the recommendation is to grant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gavin. Extremely comprehensive report. Well done. Right, so we have one speaker on this application. I'd now like to invite John Jewett, speaking on behalf of the agent, to make his presentation to the committee. You've got 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Obviously, that was a comprehensive report, and I'll try not to take up too much of your time. But I would like to thank Gavin and the other officers for their help throughout. It's been a long and difficult process, but their assistance was vital. Obviously, as you've heard, the scheme marries with the Seagate scheme, which was approved earlier this year, and it's vital to the delivery of the whole site, the whole allocation, including the earlier approval, principally through the major roadworks to the east that will come forward as part of this scheme. So as well as being complicated in itself, this application has been complicated by the involvement of 4 authorities due to the split nature of it. So again, thanks for the officers' help on that. The technical challenges that we've had have obviously affected the viability of the scheme, and the key ones were the access points. The key issues are the presence of a high-pressure gas main across that element, which has to be diverted, the adjacent drainage ditch, obviously a key issue in the area, and the need to relocate other services such as telegraph poles, safety barriers, connections, blah, blah. In addition to the social infrastructure provided on the Seagate site, the education and such, this proposal includes, as you've heard, significant shop and healthcare opportunities. There's been a relatively limited number of objections given the size of the scheme, and no statutory objections remain. And to summarise, the proposal results in benefits including obviously the delivery of housing, including that focused on elderly care accommodation on the allocated housing site in outline, community facilities and amenities, protection of significant areas of trees and open space, as you've heard, and again, the transport infrastructure upgrades for the benefit of the site itself and for local residents and businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now then, questions to or clarifications to Mr. Jowett, please. Yeah, Councillor French, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm quite disappointed to see the lack of section 106 in this application. Affordables, you've got no affordable homes. Are you going to contribute towards education?
Just put, yeah.
Apologies. I don't believe there is, no. Gavin, can you confirm that?
Yeah, so through the viability assessment, and as sort of mentioned in the report and the presentation there, primarily due to the significant sort of infrastructure costs, upfront infrastructure costs necessary to deliver it, it's concluded that the scheme won't be viable to secure contributions to social infrastructure or affordable housing.
I'm sure you'll want to come back. Right. Yeah. Yeah, as Councillor French says, it's very disappointing. Last planning meeting, I think, or the one before that, we passed a school for 600 places, including some send places as well. With these 294 houses, if we average 2 children per household, just and that's an average, that will take up the whole of the placement of that new primary, that school, what we passed 2 months ago. So I'm really, really disappointed that there is no infrastructure, because I just see we're going backwards as far as infrastructure is concerned, and yeah, it just can't keep happening. So I'm really, really disappointed. Thank you. Councillor Senate Clough.
Thank you, Chair. Hello. I wondered at what point were these upfront costs fully known and foreseeable to the developers?
Cost. The key issues, as we say, are the issues about access into the sites, which is a considerable cost. The original policy requirements talked about the potential for a roundabout into the site. That was discussed and agreed not to be necessary. Had a roundabout been provided, the viability would not have worked at all. Now, clearly it is a disappointment that we can't provide more, and we would want to. The issue of viability has been discussed with officers and independently assessed by the council. And I think one benefit to note is that there is a review proposal within the proposed conditions at 80% occupations, that any surplus that's found along the way can be then used for appropriate contributions. It is literally a problem. And the other point I think to note, of course, is the concept plan, the broad concept, did make the point itself, the council's own document, that viability at the start of the development was likely to be difficult because of the costs of developing a greenfield site with the access issues there.
Would you like to come back?
So could you just clarify at what point did you realise that the costs were going to be such that it would affect all the contributions?
Well, at the time that the application was made, of course, the viability assessment was made at that point and submitted. The viability got worse, to be fair, because of the discussions over the access points. It was considered by our consultants that a major junction improvement along the lines considered by the policy wasn't required. That was sought by the county councils, I think it's fair to say. Negotiated approach reduced the requirements, reduced the cost, but it certainly hasn't improved anything from the viability appraisal that was submitted with the application.
Okay, Councillor Marks, thank you.
Thank you. Regarding viability, we're hearing there is no money for 106, whatever, at the present time. Then why are you going forward with this planning application? If it's not viable to do, it doesn't make business sense to me to do something that's not viable. At what point you must be seeing a profit somewhere along the line. If not, you wouldn't be doing it. That profit surely should negate also back to 106 money as well.
The issue is not that there is no profit at all. Clearly, if there was no profit, then there would be no reason to do it. The developer would leave his money in the bank. But there has to be sufficient profit in any scheme for developers to carry out the works. The issue is that there's an agreed level of profit above which any additional money should go toward contributions. And that's the basis that the independent appraisers appointed by the council assess the viability.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor French, did you want to come in? Thank you.
Thank you. If this application is approved, are all these dwellings going to be market price, or are there going to be some affordables in there?
I just confirm, will there be any affordable units? No, it's a market scheme.
Well. Councillor Senate Clough.
I'd just like to ask another question, if I may. So this provision for elderly accommodation is mentioned quite frequently throughout this report. You mentioned it in your presentation, but it's not part of the committed scheme. It's outlined. How realistic is it that that is actually delivered, given everything that's been discussed so far?
It's very realistic. If I can explain the background to that, and thank you for asking. The basis of the scheme that was submitted as part of the outline was as discussed with various elderly accommodation providers. So the number of units, the form, was based on discussions that we'd had with them. However, until we got to a position where we have a planning permission, we can't get anybody on board to finally develop the scheme. Now, we do have two companies interested, I understand, to take the scheme forward, but we're depending on the planning permission in order to be able to bring that forward. And of course, that meets a specific need that's identified in the area.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else at all? No, thank you very much. So now, members, questions, clarifications to officers. Just to remind you, we have Shane Luck again from Cambridgeshire County Highways and Stuart Blake from Norfolk County Council. I think he's he's going to be on the screen. Am I right? In the air. Oh goodness. So they're here to answer questions on highway issues, obviously, if you've got any. So questions, Councillor French.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask officers, Kings Lynn operate the sills. What contributions are going towards Kings Lynn with regard to sill, if any?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Through you, Chair. So I'm not entirely certain of their still arrangements ultimately, but obviously I think through discussions with them, any properties that have come forward that sit within their boundary, so to speak, would be still chargeable, and it's done on floor space. Obviously, any of the outline elements that haven't come forward, if it's still applicable, then there would be a still charge for them as well to obviously secure.
Councillor Marks.
Thanks, Chair. This is a question really for highways. Now, I don't know which we've heard from the agent regarding the roundabout. I don't know whether that fell into Cambridgeshire or into Norfolk, because I don't know if the other gentleman is listing in the air. The reasoning behind, we've heard that had the roundabout been there, it would have obviously made this totally unviable to do. However, we hear from highways all the time regarding road safety and the request for that. So what's the idea initially for the roundabout, and how come now it's now been put, because it seems financially instead of cut, instead of on road safety grounds?
Sorry, I can come in on this. Good. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. My name's Stuart Blake, Highway Engineer for Norfolk County Council. I am here, just in the air. So with the site access, when we received the planning application, we were only presented with a priority junction for the site. So that's what we've based our consideration on. We are aware that there's potential land that may come forward as part of the allocation to the north, and that might bring a roundabout in the future. We don't feel at the moment for this development on its own that a roundabout would necessarily be required for the level of traffic that will be coming into it, and particularly because you've also got the access off Broad End Road to the east as well. So we don't feel at this stage that a roundabout would necessarily be needed. But if further development to the north does come forward, then that's something that we certainly would consider.
Councillor Marks, would you like to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, you seem to be in slight conflict with the agent. The agent said initially there was a roundabout proposed in at the start, which leads me to believe, as we've always, usually within these planning meetings, that it is the line of road safety that's taken first, as opposed to, what was going to happen in the future. So is it slightly different with Norfolk as opposed to Cambridgeshire? Because it sounds to me like suddenly the roundabout was put across against because of financial grounds more than any other grounds.
I'll just come in again. I will say that we didn't see any proposals for a roundabout on Sandy Lane for the site access when we first saw the planning application, but we are aware that there could be a roundabout that will come forward, but we're not entirely sure whether that would be part of the access for this development or if amendments would be made to the access of the Seagate development. But we certainly haven't seen any proposals for a roundabout on Sandy Lane when we've been dealing with this planning application.
Thank you.
I'm just going to bring Gavin Taylor in now.
Yeah, I think just to clarify and perhaps avoid some confusion here, I rather suspect the discussion on roundabouts was the original roundabout that was proposed potentially on the A47 at the junction of Broad End Road. So there has been obviously a lot of, over the years, a lot of project-based discussion about a potential roundabout going on the A47 there to mitigate impacts of development through discussion with National Highways. And obviously that would have been a cost that had a significant impact on viability. Through discussion with National Highways have accepted that a roundabout is not required at this time, and that a travel plan and mitigation would be sufficient to sort of mitigate the impacts of this development. So that led the development back into a potentially viable position of being able to secure some contributions and affordable housing. However, then through further discussion on the transport impacts, Norfolk County Council Highways have identified that the Broad End Road works are necessary, which are significant. So if you imagine a timeline, we originally had potentially a roundabout, so £1.5 to £2 million. You've then got that being removed, enabling that to go back into the scheme to potentially provide for social infrastructure. However, through further assessment of transport impacts, the Broad End Road works have been identified to be required, and that's back into sort of £1.5 million territory, which has pretty much wiped out the viability in terms of being able to contribute towards social infrastructure and affordable housing. So that's why we're at where we are now, in that the scheme has evolved through the last 3.5 years, starting off with the need for a roundabout, then a roundabout not being needed, to now the Broad End Road works now being required. So that's just a sort of a highlight of how we've ended up in this sort of viability position.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Marks?
Thank you, Chair. So to clarify, we are talking about two different roundabouts. We were initially talking about one on the A47. Now, from what, and we've just heard again, what Norfolk County Council have just said, it's a roundabout closer to the site than not off the A47.
I'll just bring Shane Luck into this one. Thank you.
Yes, just for some background context, this planning application has only ever proposed a priority junction onto Sandy Lane. However, the broad concept plan for the allocation makes reference to a four-arm roundabout on Sandy Lane for the purpose of safeguarding access to the land parcel to the north. However, through this application, the applicant demonstrated access to the north could be safeguarded in another form, hence negating the underlying reason for that roundabout being proposed in the broad concept plan on Sandy Lane originally.
Thank you.
You're relatively happy now, are you?
Never happy.
No, never mind. Anybody else at all for officers at all? Councillor Murphy, thank you.
I'd just like to ask one thing about the non-viability of this. I've been on and off the planning committee for a lot of years, I'll put it like that. Why are you not surprised now, Gavin, that we can't get any money from anybody? Because over the years this has been going on, we've never had any money from anybody. And it's such a long time that we forgot all about it. Why are you now surprised that this is now coming back in now, that we can't have any money for viabilities or anything like that, or 106 agreements?
Through you, Chairman, I don't think as officers we are particularly surprised. I think the surprise seems to be more coming from members, to be quite honest, Councillor Murphy. As set out in the report, and I think as Mr Jowett referenced as well, the broad concept plan for this strategic allocation has always raised the issue of viability being extremely marginal, particularly on the earlier phases of delivery where infrastructure would be needed. So to some extent, the scheme that's in front of the committee now is almost sort of entirely consistent, really, with how the BCP envisaged viability, perhaps.
Yeah, it sure did. Anyone else at all? Any Councillor Senate Clough?
Question for the officers. At 80% occupation, late stage viability test, how did you determine, and I'm asking because I don't know, how is that determined to do it at 80%? Could you explain that, please?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Through you, Chair. So our viability consultant has sort of recommended that's a reasonable sort of percentage figure of occupations, because by that time you'd have sufficient delivery of properties and occupations to get a feel for, what that profit margin is looking like in reality compared to what's been modelled in the viability. It's very difficult to do that at early stages. This is a build out that could take many years. So it's considered that 80% occupations based on the quantum is a reasonable kind of line to draw as to when you can then get a reasonable idea as to what sort of profits are being made versus house prices at that time versus build costs.
Yeah, quite a conundrum. Councillor French.
Thanks. This is a question for Gavin. How many, unless I've missed reading, how many car parking spaces are we going to have? We've got 294 houses. So how many spaces are we going to have?
So I believe with the 3-bedroom properties, it will be 2 parking spaces. 4-bedroom properties will be 3. 2-bedroom properties will be 2. And 1-bedroom, I think, are single parking spaces plus provision for potentially visitors, so for the sort of flatted developments. So it's in accordance with our parking standards set out in the appendix.
Okay, that seems adequate. No one else at all? Still in questions for officers, obviously? No, I'm going to close it now. Thank you. I'd now like to invite members to debate the item in respect to material considerations relevant to the application. If you'd like to speak, raise your hand. Councillor French.
Well, you know what I'm going to say.
I do.
I just find it absolutely, I'm not shocked and not surprised, because I do know the BCP was done several years ago. But not to have any affordables, nothing for education, nothing for national health, and even Sports England are complaining there's no contribution. And it would appear to me the only person who's going to actually benefit from this is Norfolk County Council with regard to their road improvements. I just wonder, 588, we're going to have roughly 588 children. A few weeks ago, we authorised a new school for Wisbech, as you said earlier. That would probably take all these places up. I just don't know where these developers think they'll make their profit, but give nothing back to the local community. Not happy with this at all.
Absolutely, very wise words, Councillor French. My sentiments entirely, but we are where we are. Councillor Marks.
Following on from that, it does seem to me that the developer is all for the developer and nothing for Wisbech and the surrounding area. And by agreeing this today, we are going to cause Wisbech, with the education, health and everything else, a number of issues. It would have been nice that the developer would have conceded something at the start of this, as opposed to 80%, when 80% could be 10 years down the line, bearing in mind that we will be gone as a Fenland District Council, and who will pick up the pieces from this. So my concern is today, and I'm very much 50-50 on this, whether we are just causing further down the line a lot of issues that really and truthfully we should stop today. But I wait to hear what everybody else has to say in the debate.
Okay. Councillor Benny. You've been very quiet, Councillor Benny.
Well, it's a policy compliant application. We have got no grounds to turn this down. The officers have got this right. It's part of the BCP. Yeah. That's 80-90% of certainty this land will be built on. Is it the right scheme? You can pull holes in it. As to viability, yes, we'd like to see money from this, but we work with the constraints and the policies that we have, and it ticks the box and it plays the game, and that's what we've got. If we turn it down, this will go to appeal. Personally, I welcome the housing in Wisbech. March has got 2,500 houses planned. Chatteris has got 1,700, and Wisbech, as the biggest town in Fenland, should have more housing than it's got. Where do the children and grandchildren of the people who live in Wisbech expect their children to live if we don't build them some houses? I understand with the schools, but we work with the constraints we've got, and the officers do, And I think the officers have got this absolutely right. There may be things we don't like about it, but in every application there's things that people like and don't like, but it doesn't come down to that. This needs approving.
Also, I'll just come in there, also, you missed out Councillor Benny, Whittlesey, which has had a fair lot of housing and looks to be having some more in the future. Also, obviously, we mustn't forget the villages, Mainey, Wimblington, Doddington, which have had a big take-up of houses or dwellings in the past 2 or 3 years as well. So I agree with Councillor Benny, really. It's really, really disturbing me to think that there is no infrastructure. I just can't envisage. I can't envisage it, really. Like Councillor Marks says, really, a few years down the line when these are built, we're getting problems, we're giving problems further along the line. But like Councillor Benny says, it is a policy compliance scheme. But again, I'll see what anybody... Councillor Marks, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the local plan and the NPPF require affordable housing as a core component. It seems this application is leaning on early stage viability constraints to create wiggle room later. And we've had that explained by the applicant and by the officers, and I can appreciate, you know, that there is a lot of upfront cost, but concept plans often flag potential cost pressures, but that doesn't equate to automatic exemption. And so that's my concern, that going forward it could set a precedent. And so I'm weighing everything up, and I am very concerned that this could set a precedent for other large developments to wiggle out.
Councillor Marks.
Thank you, Chair. I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Benny. It is a compliant application. And the officers have worked tirelessly to put this in front of us today. And it's it's probably the longest report I've ever seen regarding, and it was a good, solid report. It's not the officers I have the issue with. It's the developers who are trying to shy away from a commitment, which is, at the present time, they are saying this is not viable for 106 money to go forward at this present time. 80% occupancy, whatever, and then they will look at it again. That's my real big concern as to what we are doing today. But I do agree with Councillor Benny, Wisbech does need properties, and you know, grandchildren do need to go to school somewhere, but we have to remember all we're doing is putting properties there at this point with no funding for those that require it. However, we've had applications in Chatteris, we've had applications in March and stuff where there has been 106 money, affordable homes given. This one just seems to be a bit of a, well, we might be able to do it in the future, and that's my concern. I wholeheartedly agree it is totally compliant, and I think officers have done a brilliant job on this. I think it comes down to the developers, and I'm not going to say greed, but I think they need to probably look at this a little closer.
Really relevant comments, Councillor Marks. Councillor Benny.
Yeah, thank you, Jem. But the developers work with the policy and procedures around that, and it's playing the game. It's playing the game from developers. It's playing the game from policymakers and the authority. Does it tick the boxes? Is the developer making his profit? If he doesn't make profit, you won't build them. And truly, the email we had earlier this week with the changes to local government and the changes to planning, I think we are going to be struggling to get the people who are landowners who want to bring their land forward. The costs of getting an application to planning and getting it through planning are going up and up. And I think these changes are going to really restrict things. And this is going to provide a lot of work for local people. I had a developer speak to me. I saw him in the street Christmas time, and he said that he'd had 7 bungalows approved, and those 7 bungalows guaranteed 3 years' work for 15 men. How much work is this going to bring to Wisbech and the area? A lot. And also with the viability, there is a document that we did that developers don't pay any kind of contributions north of the 47, which is a live document. How much weight that carries can be interpreted in different ways, but that's why there's no contributions on here. And Wisbech is a cheap area. How much can you discount an already discounted area? Your build costs are the same whether you're building in Cambridge or Wisbech in terms of materials, and your labour costs are pretty much the same. Your land values are the things that set your profit here and what you can get for them. And with a low retail price on these houses, that's where your viability issue falls over. And that's why we're not getting the money. But equally, the people who live in Wisbech have got children and grandchildren who need somewhere to live. They shouldn't all have to move to Norfolk or Lincolnshire to find a home. If they want to live in Wisbech, they should. That's why we need these houses, and it is policy compliant.
Yeah. Councillor Marks.
Again, I can't disagree with everything Councillor Benny said. However, employment is a major thing, but also quality of life going forward. When we can't get a child into the school, when you can't get an appointment at the doctor's, when there's nothing else. And that's my issue with this, not where we are at the present time, but we go to the future. If there is no 106 money or money's given towards it, may not be 106 money going forward, it may be called something totally different. However, it seems that Norfolk are going to gain, Fenland isn't going to gain. But I'll leave it there and let's see what the rest of the debate is.
Yep, Councillor French.
Thank you. I think really we're going round in circles. It is policy compliant. Policy LP8, it's quite a lengthy pages. The BCP was done several years ago. As Councillor Benny said quite rightly, it was agreed anything north of the A47 wouldn't get any affordables. Not happy with it, but it's policy compliant. So let's move on.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. So no one's got anything else to add to it, surely? No? There's only one issue, is there? And that issue's not been resolved, but we've gone round and round in circles. So I'm going to close the debate now. Officers, any points you'd like to add?
No, nothing from me, thank you.
David? Yes or no?
I don't think there's anything really to probably contribute to the debate that members have had. I think in terms of looking at, I suppose, both sides of the viability argument, recognising the fact that this is largely a policy compliant scheme. I think as the officer report sets out, it is recognised as a lack of viability. However, in the planning balance, the conclusion is that that's detrimental element to the, or negative element to the application is balanced out by the delivery of the housing, the potential unlocking of the wider allocation, and the benefits that brings, as well as the road improvement works. As I say, I think in terms of the planning balance, that's articulated in the officer report. I think members have captured that in their debate. Ultimately, it's now down to members as to which way you wish to go on in making your decision.
It certainly is, David. So without further ado, do I have a proposer to go with officer recommendation to grant planning permission for this application? Who's going to put the hand up? Councillor French.
Reluctantly.
Okay. Have we got a second for it? You're not reluctant though, are you? So, yeah. Okay. So, to put a later side to it, we've got a proposal from Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Benny, to go with officer recommendation to approve this scheme. Can I have a show of hands on that? Reluctantly.
It's 5 votes, Chairman.
Those who don't want it, for whatever reason.
1 vote, Chairman.
1. So that application has been approved. Thank you. So, thank you for attending. This concludes today's business, and I declare the meeting closed at 13:59. Thank you very much.
Thank you.